It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Hey guys, Marvalous here, and then with me I have MJ. We're the host and co-host of Slashes and Sync.
I'm the host. She's the co-host.
I didn't realize there was a difference in the title, but apparently there is.
I always call you co-host though.
I thought host. Okay. Host, co-host. And for those of you who are listening to the audio, I pointed to MJ as the host and me as the co-host. You let me know, actually let us know, if there's any difference between co-host and host in your guys' brain. But anyway.
Should we have a talk?
Later. Not during the... They're not trying to listen to this right now. They're trying to figure it out and listen to our interpretation of the Greene trilogy or the Greene timeline.
We finally made it here. If you've been keeping up with us, both on Spotify, Apple, and on YouTube, we've been covering the Halloween franchises. We started off with a pseudo John Carpenter trilogy, even though it really isn't one. We started off with...
I mean, that's the best way to call it.
Yeah, but because it's not like he really claims 2 or Season of the Witch.
No, but he had his hand in them.
And then we go into the Thorn trilogy. And then we also went into the Rob Zombie featuring H2O. We didn't cover Resurrection, though, because of... Anyways.
Well, fuck you, too. By the way, that timeline is a 20-plus years timeline, so Halloween H2O, 2020.
Yeah.
And then you have Rob Zombie doing Halloween and Halloween 2 as his interpretation, which is roughly about 20 years from the original 78 film.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
It came
so
out
we
in
can
07,
call
I
that
think,
the 20-year era or 20-year timeline, if you will. So
True, but I do... Yeah, 20, 30... Wow, there's been a movie every so H2O
decade.
was 20 years, Rob Zombie was 30, and then
every 10
2018
years.
was 40.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And now that they've laid him to rest, I wonder if they're going to do anything for 50. Probably not.
No, they're doing that show, remember? I don't know when it's coming out, though.
If it's 50 years down, 10 years down, guys, keep
10
a lookout
years.
for the show. Because they're keeping that same trend, it's definitely going to be the case.
Fucking Miramax, bro. I wanted A24 to get the rights to it. Dude.
Yeah, I know. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the more current and commonly known trilogy. Or I guess
like them.
timeline. The Greene timeline is what he and I call them.
I like them.
Yeah, I like them too. Despite I don't even want to call it popular, despite like the majority's feedback of saying how it started off strong and ended off on a flat note, I would like to disagree. Ends is still one that I don't score the highest, but I have noticed the more times I watch it, the more I start to enjoy it. So slowly it's been climbing up as far as the score goes, but as far as ranking, it still stays at the bottom.
Yeah, it's the least of the it's ranked the least of the 3, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
I know some people think like Ends and Kills are like dog water, like straight up.
I think Kills is pretty good. Like I'm not lying. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's really good.
I think we both liked it, but then the more we rewatched it, the more we this is
like I can see why people don't like it. I thoroughly enjoy it because of the kills, for lack of better words.
No pun intended.
Yeah,
but it has the problem of being the middle child. You know, like it's in the middle of a trilogy. So
yeah,
it's
think most middle childs aren't really the best, aside from like what Empire Strikes Back.
Perhaps, yeah.
But I mean, we're going to start at the beginning of the timeline, the one that kind of kicked off this whole trilogy, if you will, which is the 2018
Halloween, otherwise known as Halloween 2018, because it did the same thing that Scream did just before it, which is Scream, but it's...
And it wasn't a requel. It was a reboot, kind of.
It's kind of a requel, because it features the same characters from the first film, but it's also... still a sequel at the same time.
Yeah. So I guess requel, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, they were poking fun at it in Scream, so
they
that makes
were.
sense.
Yeah. Misty was definitely calling 2018 a requel for sure.
Yeah. So That film is highly loved.
Yes,
And I can see why, specifically because it does carry over a lot of 78 stuff.
it does.
A lot of my friends like that. I even have a friend of mine who doesn't, and he will stand on this forever. KRW Network featuring Mark.
We bring him up a lot.
Yeah, so we'll have him
Shout
on
out to Mark.
We'll have him on the podcast.
Yes, you guys will finally get to meet him.
He, how can I say, for lack of a better term, thinks that it was lifeless. It didn't have, the creativity to do something different, and it didn't like stand on that. And while I do see his point, it's not enough for me to knock off points for this film.
Yeah.
And we'll get into like what we mean by that. But this holds a special place in your heart, and we've talked about it on this podcast before because this, alongside Hereditary, reignited your love for horror.
Definitely. Hereditary reignited my love for horror on the more psychological and more of the like paranormal side of horror, while Halloween 2018 reignited my love for just basic slasher horror.
Yeah.
So throw the two together, it was a recipe for me just diving into the horror realm and horror universe again. I think I kind of burned myself out and thought horror movies were falling flat in the early 2010s. But granted, around that time I was watching more like current films, not necessarily ones from like a decade ago or 2 decades ago. Things that were considered iconic or classic. Mainly because of the fact that my parents never let me watch horror movies growing up, and I always found a draw towards them. So once I got old enough to not care what the fuck they said, I started watching whatever was on Netflix, on Hulu, and the more basic streaming services, at least of that time.
Right.
2018 altogether, like you said, does hold a special place in my heart because it not only reignited my love for horror, it also got me intrigued to dive into the major horror films and really trying to understand the major horror icons. What I mean by that is like I dove heavily into like the Friday the 13th universe, the Nightmare on Elm Street universe, Halloween universe, Chucky universe, Hellraiser. Sorry, Hellraiser universe. The Texas Chainsaw universe. Like I was just going on a fucking bender for anything that was made from the late 70s into the early 90s. And Scream, too. Scream was another one that I went on a bender on.
I showed her Halloween 78, by the way.
Yeah,
so,
you
that
did.
was interesting.
Yeah, the first time that I watched it was with you, and I kind of sat back and I was like, we're too late. I am in. All 10 toes, my whole head, all of it.
So unlike 78, we don't start off with like a flashback of what happened, and we don't get anything from Michael's point of view.
No.
But we start off at Smith's Grove Sanitarium.
Yeah.
And it's
literally a 40 years later type of pickup.
Yeah. Loomis isn't there anymore. He's passed. Donald Pleasance, the actor, passed many years ago.
Yeah.
So
unfortunately,
they couldn't really do anything there, even though we do kind of get something with Loomis in movie 2.
We do.
Which makes me mad because we could have got more, but it is what it is.
But to give them a little bit of credit, how they factored in Loomis into the film was during the nighttime. And a good portion of this film was happening during the day. So I'm sure a lot of people would have been mad if they did what they did in Kills in 2018.
Yeah. And we're introduced to the podcasters who are there to get some insight on Michael. It seems that they've cracked some cases before, which we've heard that before. That's not new. Like people,
they've shed some new light.
Yeah, people who've gone around and investigate stuff. And,
old murder cases, old
cold
cases,
case files,
in general, and they're able to do a whole rediscovery or make that cold case hot again.
And we get like a cool, like just different shots, angles of Smith's Grove now.
Yeah.
And we see Michael's out in the yard. I guess this is where they get their free time.
Yes. And it's not some dingy ass fucking asylum. This is like a very top of the line asylum, to the point that they have like guard dogs and guards and sirens and lines drawn on the floor. Like it's fucking crazy for what seemed to be a very small town 40 years ago.
We get this interesting line about how Michael may not be aware, and I believe it was the male podcaster who says this, and Sartain says, believe it or not, or make no mistake, he is aware.
Yeah.
And I thought that might have been like a cool little callback, because as far as we know, Michael doesn't speak or talk.
No.
So, at all.
No.
Like, does nothing.
Refuses.
Yeah, so if anything,
He's very passive.
I wonder if that was a callback to Sartain maybe reading the files from Loomis about how Loomis thought that Michael was tricking the staff and like doing things like that. I wonder if that
Either
Michael's
that.
very much, he's not some guy who just stares out blankly, which he does do that, but it's like he actually is aware of his surroundings.
He has a purpose while staring blankly, if that makes any sense. I feel like it's a mix of both. It's probably what he read in Loomis's files and while he was studying under Loomis, because we don't know how long Sartain was under Loomis's wing. Like,
all they said was he's a student.
we genuinely do not know. But what we do know is that he did study under Loomis, and he is obsessed with Michael, very much like Loomis. The only difference between the two of them is that Loomis makes sure he stays on the path to where his MD and his PhD are not in jeopardy, while Sartain does the complete opposite.
Yeah.
However, I do feel like it's based off of not just, like, aside from that comment and that slight tangent, I do feel like Sartain picked up on that not only with Loomis's files, but also with his interactions with Michael. Because later on in the film, we come to find out that he's been doing a lot of studies on him. So if that's the case, then he's been watching Michael very closely for a long period of time.
Yeah. And this all leads to a scene where the male podcaster takes out the mask. He has it. I think later they confirmed that he got it through, like,
the DA's office.
The DA's office.
He was able to pull some strings in the DA's office to get the mask back. And I think you pointed this out this time during our rewatch, which we've watched this movie on so many occasions. Knowing what we know about Sartain, which is he is an obsessed motherfucker who is willing to put anybody's life at stake so this way he can see Michael in action. He warns the podcasters, especially the male one, that you do not want to cross the yellow line. And you also want to tie your shoes before you get close to these attendees, if you will. Podcaster comes down, ties his shoes, goes towards the yellow line, pulls out the mask, and everybody starts to react. Even Michael. And I always tell MJ that I feel like the reason why the atmosphere changes is because Michael is aware of the mask being there and his own energy changes. So he becomes more of a hunter. It's almost like when you see a lion out in the safari just kind of like lazing around. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they get hungry enough and they see prey and you see them still lazing around, but it's in a position where they could easily pounce.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the case for Michael. And that's why you had the dogs reacting the way that they did, the rest of the patients the way that they did. But one thing that you picked up on this time to circle back onto that topic is that Sartain doesn't stop the male podcaster when he is at the yellow line. And if anything, his toes are slightly over it. And it's probably because of the fact that Sartain is very curious to see and watch how Michael kills. And if he were to kill, it would easily be explained as an accident. Like, Sartain did his job. He warned the podcasters not to cross, and they crossed.
He does cross it too. If you think about it, when he put his arm out.
Yeah,
so that's technically crossing it if he wanted to be technical with it. So,
yeah.
But either way, we get this badass scene, say something, right? Everyone's going crazy.
Yep.
If you've seen the movie, you know what the say something line is.
Yep.
And then we cut to the title card, and they bring back the OG pumpkin. Mm-hmm. So we see all that stuff.
Coming back to life.
That was missing from a lot of the films prior. Like,
from Season of the Witch and on, they no longer did the pumpkins.
I think maybe 5?
No.
Or one of them I know at least tries to do it. It's like the orange text or something. I just don't remember which one it is. It's either 5 or 6, but one of them does try to do it. And
maybe 5.
But we don't really get anything other than that. Like, this is the Rob Zombie movies didn't have it. Mm-mm. So it's we're back with the pumpkin title card.
Which I love, because I feel like,
by the way, pumpkin.
I feel like that goes hand in hand with Halloween. Like, anybody at any point in time when I see Halloween being brought up, like the movie, you see pumpkins left and right of it. So it was good to see this title card and like the credits roll out like how the 78 did. But in a more modern twist.
By the way, just to inform y'all, for this episode, once we hit a certain point in 2018, we are gonna like streamline it and go straight to the end and talk about our thoughts, because this movie does have a more simpler plot than the other ones.
Yes.
And kills and ends are gonna take a lot more time to cover because there's multiple subplots happening.
Yes.
So once we hit where Michael escapes, we are going to jump straight to the kills and just kind of give our thoughts on it. We can always come back and do 2018 in the future.
For sure.
It's just with this, like, kills has like 4 different subplots, and it's going to take a lot more time to get through those movies versus 2018.
And same with Ends. Ends has a lot of things going around off on the sidelines. So
we're going to have a lot to say about a certain character too once we get there. So anyways, jumping back into this, we're introduced to a whole bunch of new characters.
Yes.
We get Lori back, who is now a badass, very much in her Sarah Connor Terminator days.
Very much, but she is isolated.
Isolated, yeah.
Severely isolated. And it's self-isolation, too. Funny enough, the podcasters almost touch on that the two of them walked away into their own prisons. Michael not so willingly, and Lori willingly so.
Yeah.
And like you said, we see Lori just shooting off shotguns, going out into her homemade shooting range and just practicing.
The podcasters do an interview, and it's kind of douchey. I'm not gonna hold you. Like,
it's a dick move.
Yeah, like they even bring up like the fact that she lost custody, but if they're investigators or podcast investigators, and they should know, they know, and they still brought it up.
Because they ask a dumbass question. They're just like, so when did you regain custody? And that's what causes Lori to cut off the interview to begin with. And she's like, well, you guys already know I never regained it.
Yeah.
She gets her $3,000, kicks them out, and then we finally get introduced to the rest of the cast, which is Karen, Allison,
and their dad,
Cameron,
Pete, I think.
And her father, Pete, who is fucking hilarious, I'm not going to lie. Because the first line that I think he says is, oh man, I got peanut butter on my dick.
No, the first line he actually says is, I'm going to murder you and your whole family. And he's putting like a peanut butter candy on the mouse trap.
Oh, yes. And then the next one is him getting peanut butter on his steak. So the second line, I think he was fucking hilarious because I think there's some sort of weird exchange where Allison is bringing up the idea that she wants to bring her boyfriend home. And then Pete goes around and makes a joke about how, if she isn't careful, she can become one of those white trash folk who get married at a young age, start having kids, drink beer, get high with their kids, shoot their shotguns. He goes down this rabbit hole, and Karen has to pull him back out. But what we do also notice, I should say, is there seems to be a lot of tension between Karen and Allison. A lot of tension. Allison seems very guarded and irritated anytime she interacts with her mother, but with her father, she's she lets her guard down. So it was pretty interesting to watch.
Actually, the dad's name is Ray. I wanted to fact check that.
Ray, sorry.
That actually makes a lot more sense. I don't know where I got Pete from.
I don't know either. I went along with it. Sorry, guys.
It sounded familiar for some reason.
And we've watched this movie so many times, so we have no excuse. but yeah, Ray.
But
Ray's
anyways, like she was saying, there's a lot of tension there. And a lot of it stems from Lori because it seems like Allison wants to reconnect with her grandma. And by the way, you called her grandmother the entire fucking movie.
Mm-hmm. But it's also understandable, though, because she couldn't really be in touch with her grandmother too much because of her mother. So I understand she wants to rekindle and reconnect, but at the same time, how can you when your guardian doesn't let you, you know?
Just say grandma next time. Just say grandma. There's no.
He's mad about that.
There's no pet names. There's no kitty names. It's just grandma. Even in the letter you wrote, you put grandmother in there. Come on, man. Right. Anyways.
I guess a fight stems off, or a pseudo fight stems off between Karen and Allison because Allison got nominated for the Honor Society. She wants to celebrate with her whole family. And she gave the task to her mother to invite her grandmother over. Yeah. Karen lies and says that she tried calling Lori, but Lori decided to opt out. And Allison knows this because we later on find out while she's walking with her friends to go to school that she called her grandmother herself and invited her grandmother over.
So she knew that Karen was already lying. By the way, her name being Karen is so fucking funny.
Yeah.
And then we get introduced to Allison's friends. One of them's a stoner. The other one is her best friend, I guess. And
who is also a stoner.
I'm going to say this, and I said this about movie H2O, is that they're not the worst side characters.
No.
But they're also not the most memorable either.
They're more modern side characters, I would say, because the guy is depicted to be just a type of person who tries to break away from the norm. Even the clothes that he wears is a little different. Alice's best friend seems to be on that same trend, but still keeps things a little bit more modern. The three of them seem to have their own little niche and their own little clique. And my first watch, I thought that Allison may be a little bit of an outcast, but once we get thrown into her being in high school and her being with her boyfriend Cameron, that's when I started to retract that statement in my mind because he seems to be a popular kid in school. She seems to have his attention. But maybe it might be the same thing as Lori, where whenever she was younger, where she kept to herself, she was really smart, she got good grades. But because of today's day and age, that doesn't mean that you're a dork and you get written off into the sidelines. Like, you can still catch attention from even the popular dudes.
I kind of thought the same as you, and I didn't really change it. I still feel like she was, I don't want to call her an outcast, but...
She probably is an outcast, but she was able to get the attention of Cameron.
I look at it as kind of like the Stranger Things thing with Steve and Nancy, where Nancy and her friend were kind of like, you can tell they were just in their own bubble. Yeah. But yeah, she caught the attention of Steve, who was like the most popular guy in school at the time.
Yeah. And that's what it seems to be.
Because it doesn't look like Cameron is friends with Vicky. And I mean, maybe he associates with them now, but I don't think they were friends beforehand. That. No,
definitely not. So, Cameron does have an interesting friend, Oscar, who is rather expressive.
And even he kind of comes off more like a popular, like, jock type of character.
He does, so yeah. Either jock or the person who acts like the mascot for the school, like one of the two. So
it doesn't strike me that they were friends with, like, Dave and Vicky. Like, that doesn't, like, that seems like that was Allison's group, you know, and then Cameron and Oscar are, like, their own thing, you know. But you're not wrong, though. So she does kind of come off like that, but different times, different days. Mm-hmm. They're not on the level of, like, a Rachel from 4 or, like, even Annie from 78. I just feel like they're side characters. You know? Like, it is what it is. And we move on to, I believe, the next scene, which is them at school. We get introduced to Cameron and Oscar, like she said, more jock type characters. And then that's where we get an interaction with Lori and Allison, but not before they replay or reenact a scene from 78. But instead of Michael being out while Alice is looking out into the window, is Lori. Yeah. And then Lori's giving her the money that the podcasters gave her, which I thought was pretty funny.
Tells her to go to Mexico with the money. Fuck college. I completely agree with Lori. College is overrated.
And she's got a bachelor's?
I got a bachelor's and 2 associates. And 3 associates, excuse me.
And she's still saying fuck college.
College is a fucking scam. Lori was right. Listen to Lori and just go to fucking Mexico or go to Canada. But around that time, I think the movie cuts back to the podcasters, and the podcasters are now, like, making their way back from wherever they came from.
Getting ready to leave, yeah.
They're making a pit stop at the gas station. Guy is filling up the gas. Girl needs to use the loo.
You jumped ahead a little bit.
I did?
Yeah, Michael hasn't escaped yet. Remember
yes. So
we promise we've watched this movie a lot.
Yes, I'm thoroughly excited.
Yeah. So
especially when it comes to talking about this film, because I fucking love it. I'm sorry, guys.
I think it's mentioned quite a few times that Michael is going to be leaving. They're transferring him.
Yes, they're transferring him. Yes. So then after that interaction, what is it? The Strode family is having a dinner?
They're about to have dinner, yeah, but I feel like we also get the Sartain stuff where he's saying Michael is still his patient.
Yeah, we're seeing Michael get transferred.
We get the Loomis callback, which I believe was all a voice actor. I don't think it was Loomis stuff, but I may have to fact check that later.
It sounded a lot like Loomis, and it was a voice recording. And what I think they did really well with this film is they emphasize on the fact that these recordings can degrade with time. Because
that's true.
The very last portion of the recording, Loomis's voice, or even his voice actor, who knows at this point, at least right now, their voice becomes very distorted on the tape. And if Loomis is recording this a few years after interacting with Michael, and if Michael got admitted at the age of 6, that means that it's been, 60 years? 50 years?
Perhaps, yeah.
Since the recording. So those audio tapes are, like, not going to hold the kind of information that they used to. And they're the big-ass, like, tapes too, the ones that weigh a lot. You gotta, like, sit back and reel it in like a cassette, if you guys are old enough to remember what a cassette is, or a VHS. If not, then Google it. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna pivot real quick. We were watching True Detective recently, which I don't know if we'll cover on the podcast, or we might just make a YouTube video on it. But in True Detective, the first season, they make a very interesting statement, and I didn't think about this, but it makes sense when, I think it's 2012, like, it's in the later part of the show, in the flash forward, when one of the detectives needs to go get information about the murders that happened, like, in 98, And then when he gets there, he hops on the computer, but then the guy who escorted him there is like, well, if you're looking for murders that were pre-2000, you need to look in there. And he opens the door and it's like a whole warehouse of just papers and audio tapes and like just stacked up that
they still hadn't converted it.
Nothing was converted yet and I was just like, that makes sense, but fuck.
Yeah.
So again, going back to this film, like them only having those tape recordings of Loomis makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure they figured out a way to like either get it off somebody who didn't have it the right way.
Yeah.
Or pay somebody off to where they can get those tapes. Either that or they spoke with Sartain and said, you know what, since we couldn't get an interaction out of Michael, let's go ahead. I want to listen to the older Loomis tapes, the ones that you can release.
I mean, I believe they're pretty like successful. They seem to be from overseas with their accents.
And the fact that they're willing to pay Laurie $3,000 for 10 minutes of an interview, that means that they got money. Like
Marvalous and I can sit here and break down a case, but we're not going to fly to a different country and pay for hotels and pay off people and like, so they seem to be like a successful thing. So makes sense. But anyways, I think we're getting off topic here. This all leads to Laurie, who's very much well aware of Michael leaving. She even told the podcasters that. Yeah. And she's there. And this leads to actually...
She's outside of Smith Groves, yeah.
It leads to a very cool scene of mine where she's contemplating on killing Michael. And as Michael's being transferred, you're seeing the bus take off. Mm-hmm. And Laurie just almost has like a breakdown. She just starts screaming in the car. And you get this badass scene while she's screaming in the background through her car window. You can see the lights from like all the surrounding lights in the Smith's Grove yard, and you can see like this figure walking towards her.
This shape.
Very ominous because it's almost like the shape is coming back into her life. Yeah. Again, and I
walking towards her again.
I thought that was like such a dope scene, and I said this about Rob Zombie Halloween 2. That's probably one of the best looking Halloween films ever made, and these are right up there with it.
These like, moments, yeah.
78 has his own, I guess, rhythm to it, and it definitely was breaking boundaries back then with different POV shots. Yeah. But Rob Zombie 2 and then also these films, just cinematically, they look good. Yeah. They're very screenshot worthy. Yeah. And we get a lot of those. And this is finally when we get to what you're talking about with.
Yeah. Well, the bus crashes. Michael finally gets to the bus, is being transported to a higher status facility. Yeah.
I think more lockdown.
More secure, for sure. A higher security, higher level security asylum,
basically
if you will.
locking him away. Like there was no way for Sartain to consult with him anymore. Like he's getting just thrown away.
Yeah, he's putting away in a newest place, in a new asylum where it's maximum security, and Michael's going to be locked away until the end of his days, or at least that's the idea. Yeah. Quoting Laurie like bar for bar at this point in time. Yeah. But the bus crashes, lo and behold. And we see all the Smith Grove attendees walking out carelessly after the crash. And it's all because of this father and son duo who are driving up the mountain, ironically enough, to go hunting. And this is when we see Michael has finally escaped. The father never comes back to the car. The kid, who knows how to handle a gun, by the way, grabs the shotgun, walks outside, starts looking for his father after calling 911. Ends up shooting Sartain in the shoulder, which I find hilarious. And that's whenever Michael comes about, gets in the car and snaps this kid's neck. And this kid is probably 10, 11, 12, maybe 13 years old at the time. So this is the first time that we have seen Michael kill a child on screen. Yeah. And you and I have the headcanon that it's probably because he is a threat to Michael. Yeah. And by a threat, I mean he knows how to shoot a gun, specifically a shotgun, that, the recoil could easily throw a 12-year-old back, but doesn't.
I mean, Michael was also there when he shot Sartain, so he probably saw that.
Probably, yeah. So he kind of put two and two together, finally drives into town, and this is where we get to the scene of the podcasters making his pit stop at the gas station, and Michael also being there. And I think this is where it bleeds back into the callback that you were saying earlier, where 2018 seems to pull a lot of the stunts that 1978 does, which is Michael is moving a lot in the background of this film. Yeah. There is a lot happening in the blurred out backgrounds of this movie. And first time watching, obviously you're focusing on what's right in front of you, not in the background, but be it consciously or subconsciously, first time or 100th time, you still pick up on the tension that's happening behind the main characters. You see Michael walking across right behind the podcaster's van or truck into the mechanic shop. When the girl is inside the gas station asking for the loo or the bathroom, you see Michael killing the mechanic in there. This girl walks into the restroom, and by the time Michael makes his way over to her, he already has the classic mechanic suit.
Yeah. Also, too, there was a woman in the van who was talking to the male podcaster, and she was
Not talking. She was making like eye
Oh yeah,
motions.
not talking, but she was making eye, and she was like telling him like to look, and
Yeah.
he wouldn't look because he was confused.
Yeah.
And
She was almost trying to warn him, like, "Hey, look out."
Yeah, very interesting there. But we get to the restroom scene, and we talked about this in one of the earlier episodes where I think they took some inspiration from H2O. There's also a restroom scene there too, and it's almost, I don't want to say shot for shot the same, but similar ideas, like seeing them through the crack of like the little tiny little inch you get there between the door and the wall, and like just little things like that. But what's different was Michael dropping the teeth of,
fucking insane.
I guess the guy
the mechanic that he killed.
No, I think it was the guy that was in the office.
The register?
Yeah, I remember when he crushed his jaw.
Yeah, the cashier.
So he dropped his teeth, and that shit was badass, dude.
Seeing the teeth smack onto the floor while it's covered in blood was fucking insane.
Yeah.
And then the music picked up, and I knew from here on out, I'm just going to see a lot of blood being spilled. And we were right.
He kills the male podcaster, kills the female podcaster.
Female podcaster is like probably a very swift, easy kill with the snap of her neck. The male podcaster, however, is like a slow and brutal fucking death, dog.
Yeah.
He is like cracked in the head, bleeding out, struggling to get up. And then finally, once Michael turns his attention away from the male podcaster to the woman, kills her off, he then turns back to him and like finishes him off.
We don't see it though with him finishing him off though.
No, but we can definitely.
We know he died though.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah,
and we get the iconic scene. At least I think it's iconic. I would put it up there in the Halloween scene. He goes to the trunk.
Yep.
And they have this badass piano playing, right?
Very slow.
I think it's a very new riff too. It's one of the ones introduced in this film.
Yeah.
He puts the mask on, closes the trunk. Michael Myers is back.
Yep.
He has escaped. And as Marvelous said, this is where, again, there's different things, like the cops being a little bit more of the focus point. We get Hawkins. We get Lori kind of trying to warn her daughter. We get some stuff with Allison. There's a whole, party scene happening at the school. There's a dance. But mainly, when it comes to Michael, a lot of this stuff is shot for shot the same as 78.
It's very similar.
There's a lot of him walking around. Even one of the shots of him bumping into this small kid, very similar to when a kid bumped into him in 78. Like, it's there, and I'm okay with it. I'm going to just explain this real quick before we get into the kills. I feel like if it's good, I'm fine with predictable. I do think at some point being too creative can be a hindrance to you.
Yes.
Don't get it twisted. I'm all about creativity. I want to let that shit flow. But when you're diving too much into it, you can kind of lose yourself in the sauce.
Yeah.
It's a good sauce, but you're losing yourself in it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it can be a hindrance to you, but overall, if predictable is executed fine, I'm okay with it. So I personally didn't have a problem with it.
I didn't either. I mean, like I said, I watched 2018 before 78, but comparing the two together, there's a lot of scenes and a lot of moments where it's very similar. At the same time, though, I feel like it's a more modernization version of it in 2018. Not only that, but there are tweaks here and there that do make the movie its own.
What do you think about the kills?
Kills were great. The kill that Michael did while he's walking through his neighborhood, getting into the house of that one lady and stabbing her through the neck after she just got off the phone.
Yeah. That
still to this day takes my breath away.
He takes down like 2 or 3 people in that span of just him walking across from house to house.
I think it's like 6 minutes, 7 minutes of screen time.
In my head, all that's playing is let the bodies hit the floor.
Yeah.
Like he's on a rampage.
He's dropping them.
And we end up at the Julian house, and then I feel like that kill was okay with Vicky. I mean, I think he kills Dave off screen, right? Hawkins just finds him hanging.
Yeah.
Very similar to the 78.
Yeah. He kills Dave off screen. He kills Vicky. And like a very boogeyman-ish style, if you will, because you have
the monster in the closet.
The monster in the closet. You have Vicky's kid that she's babysitting is asking her to check the closet before they leave for him to sleep because he's afraid of the boogeyman. And funny enough, the boogeyman is in his closet. Vicky gets killed. The boyfriend also gets killed, and more bodies start hitting the floor at this point. Julian makes it away. The kid that Vicky was babysitting, his name is Julian. He makes it away. He's the only survivor of that whole interaction.
Yeah, that whole like scene.
Yeah, very similar to like Lindsay.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah.
So at this point, Laurie meets up with Hawkins. That's when we find out that Sartain is up and moving around. He gets placed with Hawkins.
Yep.
And Hawkins is a pretty important character, but that's more in 2, so we'll talk about that in a second. But Hawkins and Sartain are together. Sartain wants to preserve Michael and keep him alive, whereas
He wants to get to Michael.
Hawkins wants to kill him.
One thing that you and I forgot to mention, though, is that in this movie, Hawkins is viewed as a joke amongst the police department. He isn't viewed or respected as somebody who is a senior. I think he is still a deputy after 40 years.
Yeah, that's definitely played up even more later on. We didn't get to the scene yet, but 2 of his colleagues are kind of like making fun of him.
They do, yeah. So he's not the most respected. That's one of the reasons why Sartain also falls on his shoulders. Another reason why is because, I mean, Sartain just says, I'm going wherever you go, because it seems like you're going to be finding Michael first before the rest of these idiots. Sartain was right. You
can tell he has a vendetta against Michael, so he may not be up there in rank, but there's something pushing him there. Yeah. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So ultimately, Sartain, his whole plan is to bring Laurie and Michael together.
Yes.
They eventually do that after hitting Michael with a car.
With a cop car.
And Hawkins gets stabbed in a pretty gnarly way. And
it's Sartain who does it.
Yeah, and you would think this is the end of Hawkins with how bad he got stabbed. Like, it was in the throat, dude. Like, multiple times.
Yeah.
So
I think it's like once or twice.
Yeah. Very interesting. But anyways, he gets stabbed. He's taken out of the picture. They've also picked up Allison. Now, Allison's forced to watch Sartain not only put the mask on, but shrug along this 280-pound guy and just throw him into the back of the cop car.
Where Allison is
at. She's not even in the passenger seat, bro. She's in the back seat.
And mind you, before all this, she's being chased by Michael as she's trying to get home. Yeah. Oscar has also been impaled by one of the neighbors' gate door. Yeah. So, like, she is in fear, and she's watching this all happen. I think at this point, Sartain also makes it known amongst Allison that, and I think maybe even Hawkins, before he stabs him in the throat, that he's been trying to get Michael out and trying to see him in the quote-unquote wild and see everything that Michael does in action, so this way he can fully understand Michael. Sartain is just obsessed with figuring out how Michael ticks and what makes him be who he is.
Yeah, and we get to that point. Alongside all this happening, Laurie has Karen and Ray over at her house, and we kind of see what her house is.
Yeah.
It's like a little hell house, no pun intended.
It's a trap house.
Yeah, trap house.
Traps, not
trap. Yeah.
Yeah.
We get you. Yeah. And we see what caused a lot of the paranoia and fear for Karen, you know?
Yeah, and for Laurie too.
And for Laurie. But ultimately, I keep saying that word, but I'm not trying to say it as much as possible, you know? But it's what
okay.
it is.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, yeah. YouTuber problems. I was kidding. Make it in the podcast world. So Michael ends up at the house with Laurie due to Sartain, but not before Sartain gets probably one of the most insane kills.
Yeah.
Stomps his head. One stomp, by the way. And it pops like a melon, dude.
His brain matter is everywhere.
Not even Tyler Maine's Michael could stomp a head in with one shot.
This Michael was ready for it, and he did it. Killed Sartain. Allison made her way out of the car, and Allison finds her way to her grandmother's house. Michael also finds his way to Laurie's house, and this is where we get the final showdown. Or at least, so we think.
He kills Ray. So much for the jiu-jitsu, Ray. That didn't really help out there.
You're not going to grapple somebody who has a knife or can kill you with their hands. I'm just going to leave it at that, but I digress.
What did you think of the Laurie showdown?
Laurie's showdown was pretty cool. We got to see all the efforts that she has put in during the last 40 years. Yeah. We got to see her survival instincts kick in, for sure.
Yeah.
And we also got to truly find out what that house was made to be, because Karen was always portraying it as a home that she was afraid to be in and a home that didn't feel like home.
Yeah.
But that wasn't that was the case. Laurie was not intending for that house to be theirs. That house was meant to be a trap for whenever Michael came out and about again. And Laurie's prediction was right. He was released back into the wild. He's back out. He's at Laurie's doorstep, be it under his control or not. Doesn't really matter.
Right.
And Laurie does a good job of baiting Michael as well and like really cornering him and getting him down there. But it's not just her. It's the two other Strode girls, the full 3 generations of Strodes who are essentially responsible for the downfall of Michael. He gets lured down into the basement. They all figure out a way to get him trapped there, but not without some like issues arising here and there. I think Laurie gets stabbed in the side right before all this happens too. So that's one of the reasons why Karen and Allison need to like step up and like really become proactive. Karen has a bomb ass moment at this part of the movie because at this point in time, I did not really like her as a character. But Karen won my heart when she pretended to have a breakdown and Michael tried to sneak up on her, but then Karen picked up the gun and just shot him like as if it was second nature. Yeah. Loved it. And that's whenever Karen also reveals to Allison and us that this home was not meant to be a survival bunker. It was meant to be a trap for Michael and to keep him there. So we come to find out there's a bunch of gas lines being distributed all throughout the house, and they all have this like little electronic heating device to cause the gas to light when there's just enough, and the house explodes. Yeah. And catches a fire.
And Michael's in that fire.
Yes.
And the dope thing about this movie is that you get this badass shot of all 3 generations of Strode. 3 women there just standing above Michael. And then you also get the iconic heavy breathing throughout the credits with the fire burning. To kind of imply that Michael, even though there's fire, he's still
very
alive.
Similar to the ending of Halloween 2.
Yes.
Very similar to the ending of Halloween 2. Yes. Which then brings us to Halloween Kills.
Again, it's so sacrilege for us to talk about 2018 like this. I wish we could talk more about this, but we really don't want this podcast to be 3 hours, like an hour on each topic. So
we're trying to save a little bit of time for you guys.
Yeah, not just for us, but also for you guys. So Halloween Kills is where it gets...
Fuck us. It's mainly you guys.
Halloween Kills is... I'm like, damn, bro, you work. Okay. Halloween Kills is where we get a little bit more plot. Which, funny enough, a lot of people say Halloween Kills doesn't have plot, but that's where you get a lot more of the concept of evil, the narrative of paranoia and fear, what evil does to a community. In fact, David Gordon Green himself commented on the Halloween Kills that it's supposed to represent misinformation, fear, paranoia within a community. Like, it's supposed to represent all of that. And I think
you see all of that in the film.
It does capture that. I will say this, though. The theatrical cut is different than the extended cut. Marvalous and I primarily watched the extended cut, and that's the one we're familiar with. So that's what we're going to be covering on this episode. We have seen the theatrical cut, but we both think the extended cut is superior, so we don't watch it at all anymore.
No, we have the option to watch the extended or to watch the theatrical. I think we only watched the theatrical twice since we've downloaded it.
We haven't watched it at all. We watched it once in theaters, and that was it.
No, we watched it once at home.
I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure it was just one time because I got curious and there was a lot of things that was left like
either that or
question mark.
Either that or we fast forward through it. I don't remember watching all the way through.
I don't know, but I do know it was more than once. And for sure the extended version is a whole lot better because the movie picks up literally right where it left off, where Laurie and the rest of the Strode girls are in the back of the truck that they flagged down. They're all on their way to the hospital, and we see firefighters driving in the opposite direction towards Laurie's old home to fight off the fire, and Laurie screams out, "Let it burn," on a repeated basis.
Which is, funny enough, supposedly an homage to an deleted scene in movie 2, the original sequel, where Loomis says, "Let it burn." No, actually movie 4. Yeah. The flashback to Halloween 2, where Loomis is screaming, "Let him burn," as to Michael Myers. That's how movie 2 ended. So we get a flashback to how they survived in 4. They probably should have showed that. That would have been a little bit easier for people to understand why they were alive still. Yeah. But, I mean, neither here nor there. Yeah. Anyways, also, before we even got to the Let It Burn scene, there's other scene as well where Cameron is walking around and he finds Hawkins.
He finds Hawkins on the floor.
Yeah, then we cut to the Let It Burn, and then we cut back to Hawkins, and that's when he's saying, we need to let
it needs to die.
It needs to die.
It needs to die tonight.
Very similar to Laurie. I guess it's supposed to be like coincide with her.
And same with the tape that the podcasters found in the previous movie too.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's calling back on a lot of different things that we've seen throughout the current and even the older Halloween films, if you will. I can't even call it a franchise, but films. At this point in time, also, there's another subplot where we get thrown into a bar, and it's a local bar within Haddonfields. And you see this doctor and nurse duo who are walking in, and for whatever reason, they seem to be the main focus at this point in time in the film, at least in the bar. We don't really know who they are. If you
we saw them in 2018, actually, in the background walking.
In passing.
Yeah, walking to their car, which they live right next to Julian, which makes sense.
They live right next to Julian, and funny enough, the reason why we see them is because Michael is walking right past them to the next house that he's going to kill. They get to the bar, and there's this group of like older and somewhat rowdy people sitting right above them. This couple kind of not necessarily snaps at them, but tells them like, "Hey, quiet down." And one of the group members breaks off, goes onto the stage, and introduces another group member, who we come to find out the original person going on stage is Lonnie, the same Lonnie who was making fun of Tommy back in 1978. And Lonnie is actually introducing Tommy to the rest of the crowd. And this is where Tommy comes back up on stage.
Now played by Anthony Michael Hall.
Yes.
The original actor did not come back, even though he wanted to, supposedly. And also not Paul Rudd either, because of scheduling conflicts.
It was around the peak of Marvel, I would say.
Very interesting I don't see how Paul Rudd could have been used in this movie.
The way that Tommy is portrayed in this film, I don't feel like Paul Rudd would have... Okay, let me rephrase that. The way that Tommy is portrayed in this movie, I personally don't see Paul Rudd portraying that kind of character. But if he was able to pull it off, then that shows his versatility as an actor. Yeah.
Anthony Michael Hall is a really good actor.
Yes.
But as Marvelous and I have pointed out, he plays dicks in a lot of films. Like, even in the ones where he's kind of nerdy, he's still very much... Like, in Weird Science, he's a geek, but yet he still bullies his friend who's even more geek than he is. So like, he's always a dick in these movies.
Yeah. And I mean, he kind of gives off that look. I'm sure he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
But I feel bad for him being typecasted. I'm not going to lie. But he does seem to have that trend going.
Edward Scissorhands, this one. Like, he's in this film. Like, you wouldn't think of it when you first see him, even though I think Marvelous pointed out that he kind of gives off like drunken dad energy, which is fine.
Or that weird uncle at the barbecue.
Yeah, which that's not fine, but it's there. But you don't think too much of it because he's just kind of recapping the events of 78.
He is, yes. And he seems to be feeding in on the idea of the boogeyman for people who don't know who Michael Myers is.
But what I think a lot of people, mainly the people who kind of hate on Halloween Kills, don't understand about this scene is that while Tommy is saying this to the crowd, he himself doesn't believe it.
Not anymore, no.
That kid who believed in the boogeyman, the one who swore on his life that he was out there and tried to get the adults to listen, that kid is gone.
Yeah.
He's not there.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much his character for this whole film because he thinks throughout this movie that he can...
Michael is flesh and blood.
Yeah, he can take him out one-on-one.
Michael is just flesh and blood. That's what he thinks. That's what he truly believes. The cool thing, though, while he's on stage is that he introduces the rest of the people that is in his group, which is what people that I like to call the Myers survivors. There's Marion, there's Lindsay, there's Tommy himself, Lonnie, and then Lori is also part of the group, but we know where she's at right now.
Yeah, she's supposedly always there on Halloween, but she's not there this time.
Yeah.
But Marion is the nurse who was helping escort Michael with Loomis back in 78. She's come back in a lot of older films too. Yeah. So she's somewhat of a recurring character, but this is her in this timeline. Yes. We also get Lindsay, who was played by one of the housewives, right?
Yes. The original one of the actress. Or one of the Orange County housewives. I forget her name, but she was the original child actor in 78, and she came back for 2018.
You met her, right?
I did, yeah. I actually served her at the restaurant that I used to work at and manage. She's really nice. I think she's one of the only OC housewives that I've met who was genuinely down to earth and kind.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, hi. You're very nice.
But the bar scene kind of sets a lot of things up for what we're gonna see with the community because Tommy creates a lot of hysteria.
He does, but it's not his fault because while he's telling the story and he's wrapping it up, the townsfolk actually get alerts on their phone. And this is where I guess the local news station or the police station or neighborhood watch or whatever kind of shit that you need to be on to get these kind of notifications put out the fact that a bus from Smith's Grove was compromised
Yes.
And there's several attendees who are unaccounted for, one of them being Michael and one of them being another individual who I call the Umbrella Man.
Yes, and they posted pictures of both Michael and the Umbrella Man.
Yes.
But they didn't tell you specifically who's who?
No, they did not. They just said if you see these two, these are the faces, and if you see them, they're extremely dangerous, contact authorities. That's it. So mix that with Tommy's telling the story of the boogeyman and the doctor, the doctor who's dressed up as a nurse. Funny, I know. She decides to break away and go into her car. She claims that she saw Michael.
You're jumping a little ahead here. So once they get all that stuff there, we cut back to the house that's burning.
Oh, sorry.
And the fire. Please believe us when I say we've watched these movies.
I just get so excited because I'm trying to connect all the lines between the subplots together, not necessarily go by what's being shown on the screen.
Yeah,
so,
I just wanted to get this all because we haven't talked about Michael in a second yet.
Yeah.
So Michael is back. He's in the house burning. He's, I guess, protected himself in that cage that Lori had with all her weapons. So
somehow, some way.
Yeah, the cage opens up. Michael kills the fighter that's there. And
one of the firefighters falls through the ground.
And then one tries to reach in to grab his friend, but instead Michael grabs him. And then we get I'm going to use this for the thumbnail on YouTube. We get the shot of Michael coming out of the house is burning. Big dick energy, bro.
The aura that he has in that given moment is insane.
I hate to say it, for anyone who shits on this movie, fine, but any other Halloween movie, Michael has never looked this cool, including 78.
I think, what was it? When we got the reactive lights, that was the first movie that you played because you wanted to see how it would look like.
Yeah.
And aside from the lights accentuating what we already knew was fire, literally and metaphorically, I guess, that moment, I feel like it captures the energy that Michael is on. He is ready to go on a rampage. He is ready to spill blood. He doesn't care how many bodies he needs to tear apart to get back to Lori, but he will.
So while everyone at the bar is getting caught up on what happened in 2018, we're over here watching Michael catch 11 to 15 bodies. I think they say it. It's like
bare minimum of 10, maximum of 16. And they're all firefighters. And mind you, firefighter suit and firefighter armor is heavy and is very difficult to cut and is very difficult to get through. So the fact that Michael used a decent amount of force to not only break through their helmets, but also through their gear is fucking insane. Not only that, but I told you this. One of the firefighters sprays him with a hose. Full blast. And mind you, firefighter hoses have a lot of fucking force.
Yeah.
If you go to a school to where they teach you about the whole situation with the segregation and the fight for equal rights amongst people who are within the minority and those who were not, firefighters would hose down motherfuckers who were protesting, and those guys would get knocked over within seconds of the water hitting them.
Yeah.
Michael did not get knocked over. As a kid at my elementary school, they would pay the firefighters to show up and spray the fire hose for us to play around with because it was so fucking hot. I one time told the firefighter, please try and hit me full blast. The firefighter only did it I think a third of the way, and I could not walk up after about 20 feet. There was a good 15 feet left before I got to the base of the hose, and it hurt too much. So put that into perspective. Michael has a lot of strength here. A lot of fucking strength.
He bodies all of them, lifts one up too with the saw. And keep in mind, I think what people don't understand about that feat is that not only is he lifting the saw, which those saws are heavy.
They are.
There's a reason why they're stationed at tables.
Yes.
So he's lifting the saw up, but also lifting a human being up who also has all that armor on.
That gear is at least 40 pounds.
Yeah, so he's lifting bare minimum, what?
300 pounds?
300 to 400, I would say probably. So
yeah,
that dude is insane, right? And I can't even, that scene is so badass. But that's when we come back to the bar, and that's when Lonnie gets a call from Cameron about the fact that the cops had to show up because he found Hawkins on the floor.
Yep.
And things are going down. Lonnie leaves, Cameron's in trouble, and that's where we see the nurse step out. And this is where we kind of pick things up, and we're gonna kind of start steamrolling through here, which is where she thinks Michael's in the car, because remember, they only show the pictures, they didn't show the names, which is very hilarious to me. If you're already revealing their faces, just reveal their names.
Reveal their names too.
Yeah.
But I don't think they wanted to cause mass hysteria either, which caused a counter effect to it.
It did kind of counter. effect on them. But
Yeah.
anyways, she sees the Umbrella Man, but she thinks it's Michael. She runs back in there, ecstatic or whatever, freaked out. And that's when the townfolk come out the bar.
No, not the townfolk. Tommy decides to connect with the bar owner and gets good old Huckleberry from the bar owner, with his permission, of course, walks out to confront Michael with a wooden fucking bat.
And keep in mind, the townfolk are there right behind him. Or
Vouching for him.
Or at least the bar folk, whatever you want to call them. And they're hyping him up. There's even one specific guy in the background saying, oh, Tommy Doyle's gonna fuck Michael up. And I'm just like...
Are you sure?
All these drunk dudes, bro, just talking shit. And I'm not going to get into the... Again, we're going to cover these movies by themselves in the future. But essentially, it leads to where the Umbrella Man escapes when he drives the car off and crashes. And we get this shot of Tommy Doyle with like the red light from the car, like just kind of like shining on him. And he's holding the bat like this, saying, you think you can come to this town and scare us? I'll swing my bat over your head real quick, make you go night-night.
Yeah.
He is really his hype man in his own fucking movie, bro. Like, it's... I don't think people understand the significance of this because it plays a huge part in the film.
It does.
These people think that Michael is flesh and blood, especially Tommy. That's not the case.
No.
And it's constantly told to us both on opposing sides, one being Lori and what she perceives Michael to be. And the same with Hawkins, actually, too.
Hawkins even says it himself. And this is where we get the expansion of Hawkins, his background, why he stayed as a deputy. We fully see... It's this movie that we see, like, a younger Hawkins.
Yeah, we skipped over it. It happens earlier in the film.
Yeah.
But now you see why we needed to, like, kind of skip 2018 a little bit, because there's so much happening in this movie that we do need a full hour, if not more, to talk about it. Like,
essentially, yeah, because earlier on in the film, I think before the title card even plays out, we snap back to set 78. We see Hawkins responding to the call. Michael has already gotten up after being shot 6 times. He's back at his house. You have Hawkins and his partner going into the Myers house, walking through, and his partner is telling Hawkins that he used to actually have play dates with Michael because his mother felt bad for Michael's mother and that Michael didn't have any friends growing up either. So this movie almost seems to put out the fact that Michael was very different at a young age, not that he snapped suddenly. So it could be like a culmination of different things. And this is the first time that we're getting like a better background of a child Michael, if you will. One thing leads to another, and I think the partner ends up getting caught in Michael's arms. Hawkins ends up shooting him and killing him.
Yeah, one of the big things you crossed over was the whole staring out the window. That plays a big part in this film.
Yeah.
He stares out his bedroom window, but then...
Judith's bedroom. Or Judith's window. I
don't know if he specified it was Judith's bedroom earlier, though.
I'm pretty sure it was.
A window at Smith's Grove, or whether it's Judith's window, whatever the case may be.
Even at a young age.
He's always looking out.
And the reason why Hawkins even runs into the Myers house is because he sees Lonnie like curled up into a ball because he had his exchange with Michael. Michael doesn't really do anything to him, but Lonnie is fucking petrified because the cops just literally pulled up towards him and his group of bullies, funny enough, to tell them that they need to go back home. That a man in a white mask is going around killing a bunch of kids. So once that whole thing happens, Hawkins' partner looks out the window, and this is where Michael jumps him. And Hawkins runs in. He tries to save his partner, ends up shooting his partner instead, because Hawkins is a terrible fucking shot from young Hawkins to present day. And Michael ends up walking out and gets confronted by a whole group of cops. Loomis is also seen at the end of the staircase where he is screaming out, did Michael kill? Did Michael kill again? I need to know. And not
CGI Loomis, by the way. This is an actual actor who just looks like him, which is crazy.
Which I love. I fucking love. Because, this is what MJ was talking about earlier in 2018, that they could have used this character throughout the film instead of Sartain. But again, this is where my argument comes to place. Loomis is only depicted in that one given moment, and it's during a nighttime scene. It's not during the daytime scene. So who knows? Maybe if there was a lot of bright light, there would have been too much makeup, too much CGI, too much shit for people to pick apart later on down the line. So I think it's fine that they moved on with Sartain. But my biggest critique with 2018, and I told MJ earlier today, funny enough, is that we don't get enough of Sartain, despite his flaws as a character on his own.
Yeah.
But at this point in time, you have like Lonnie driving over to the hospital. Like we're flashing back over to the point that we were at earlier, where after the call with Cameron, who is his son, Lonnie drives over to the hospital to pick him up because Cameron is accompanying Hawkins on the ride over to Haddonfield Memorial Hospital. And this is where the Strode girls bust in, get into the ER, and they get accommodated by the rest of the hospital staff. I think the Strode girls make it before the rest of the town because they're attended to at a rapid pace.
It wasn't as busy as it is later.
No, yeah. And this is where we see everybody kind of deal with the losses that they just experienced in their own ways. Karen is secluded off into a room, closes all the doors and the blinds, and just starts crying after washing her hands. Allison just seems to be curled up into a corner, wrapped up in her rage and in her grief. And while Lori is being operated on, I think Karen has a full breakdown.
Yeah,
and
remembering
then
Ray.
she ends up walking over to the coroner room to look for her husband, Ray. And the coroner ends up yelling at her, saying, "What are you doing here? You can't be in here." Nurse calls Karen over because the police want to do like a whole interview with Karen and Allison. And this is where the two younger Strode girls get the news that Michael really isn't dead.
Yeah.
The police had just come across all the firefighters and their bodies at Lori's old home, and Karen and Allison come to an agreement. Allison, not so happily so, I should say, where they won't share this information with her grandmother, with Lori. So, what is it? Karen makes Allison go back to Lori's room, so this way she can watch over Lori while she's still asleep and drugged up. Karen is trying to accommodate for the news that she just got, pulling a Karen, ironically enough, screaming at the hospital staff saying, like, why don't you have better security? Why isn't there security here? Like, we all know that this man is hunting my mother, so on and so forth. And I think this is where Allison kind of chimes in that, no, it's not during this part of the film, but Karen is essentially screaming about why there isn't maximum security. Cameron also at some point runs up and finds Allison, talks to her about how like him, his father, Tommy, and the rest of the group, the Myers survivors at the very least, are trying to rally a bunch of people and hunt down Michael.
Yeah.
Allison, because she's wrapped up in so much grief and so much rage, she hops on board. She's ready to go. And that's when Karen sends her to Lori's room. That's another thing that comes up during that whole debrief of news. Allison decides to break off. She meets up with Karen and Lonnie, and they go in one car, and Tommy goes in his own car. Lindsay, Marion, and the nurse and doctor end up going up in their own car. And we watch as Tommy starts to round people up to help them hunt for Michael. And this is where more of the kills start to pick up again, too.
What did you think of the kills of this movie? No pun intended.
Very thought out, very bloody, and I liked it. I think it was a good film because at this point, like I said, Michael is like making his way through town again, and
he kills another kid, by the way, too. He kills
3.
3 of them?
He killed all 3 kids who were wearing the mask of the Season of the Witch.
No, 2 of them escaped. He put the 2 masks on Marion and someone else.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, 2. Remember, Lindsay tells those 2 kids to get off the swings and they run?
Yeah.
But he already killed their friend, though.
Oh, the boy, yeah. Because they're so... at this point, there seems to be a couple, like Big John and Little John, who are living in the old Myers house. And
there's so much that happens in this movie, dude.
They get confronted by these kids who are wearing the same mask that we see in Season of the Witch. Whenever Lindsay, Marion, and her group are running around trying to warn people about Michael being out, they come across these same kids. And Lindsay is trying to tell the trio that they need to go. And the trio, or at least the leader of the trio, tips off Lindsay and says there's a man in the white mask in the back over there constantly playing peekaboo, and he's trying to be scary, but he's really not. Lindsay screams and has a full-on breakdown. The kids finally run away, but only until after they see their friend's body. Michael then shifts his focus over to Lindsay and starts hunting her down, but Lindsay kind of tucks away, so then Michael shifts his attention over to the car where the 3 remaining folks are there, and he starts picking them off one by one in some of the most hilarious ways.
Yeah. Some people think it's comedic, and one of them definitely is, but...
Yeah. The girl in the new nurse costume gets offed in the most astonishing way. And I'm not going to try and make fun of her because I know for a fact, like, if I was in that situation, I would not be an exception to said kill, because she pulls out a gun ready to kill Michael, and Michael kicks open the driver's seat door, causes her hand to flip over, and girl's still pulled down on the trigger to the point to where she ends up blowing her own brains out. Marianne also gets killed by her own gun, but the gun does not have bullets at this point because she has been trying so hard to get to Michael, and Michael did not catch any of them. The male nurse who is dressed up as a doctor gets killed by Michael's bare hands. What is it? Michael then shifts his focus back onto Lindsay. Lindsay stays hidden, and then Michael just kind of breaks off to walk back into town.
And he's already killed a lot of people. I think overall this film has 30 plus kills in it. It's like the
bare
most
minimum.
It's the most kills in a Halloween film, I think.
Yeah,
so.
Bare minimum for sure. I think Lonnie, Cameron, and Allison are still going their own way, doing things, and then this is where Tommy comes across Lindsay. Lindsay gets placed back into the hospital, and this is where Tommy connects with Lori.
Lindsay also says something interesting about looking into his eyes, which that plays a pretty big part in Ends, which we'll get to soon.
It does, yes.
And she's pretty much traumatized for the rest of this film. We don't really see her after that.
No, I think she's recovering, and not just physically, but psychologically as well.
Yeah.
And this is where Tommy connects with Lori, and this right before Tommy connects with Lori, she finally gets the news that Michael is still alive.
And there's a whole commotion happening. When Tommy's there, he pretty much creates a little mini riot.
Yeah.
That's where evil dies tonight, which, funny enough, people say that said a bazillion times. I'm actually going to be that guy right now and say they say it 5 times total if you're not counting the chant. So
not counting the chant outside.
Yeah.
But he rallies up riles up all the people that are within the hospital in complete hysteria, trying to figure, all these people are trying to figure out where their loved ones are, if they are alive, if they've survived, all the above. And Tommy figures out a way to rile them up, group them together, and explicitly says in front of law enforcement that they're going to kill Michael and that evil will die tonight. Law enforcement doesn't do shit. They just kind of sit there and they're just... Even the sheriff just kind of goes, well, fuck me, I guess. All right.
I think because a lot of their first responders and other cops are already out looking for Michael.
Yeah.
And I think even right before that scene happened, one of them said, we don't have the manpower to handle a scope of this crime scene. So they reached out to other towns.
I think so, yeah.
So it's there's only 3 cops there, and it's a whole
3 or 4 at most,
there's
including the sheriff.
There's a whole fucking riot happening there, dude. It's...
Mind you, bodies are pressed up against each other like fucking sardines in a can in this whole hospital lobby. And this hospital is not small. This hospital looks pretty big.
Yeah.
But they all start storming through, trying to figure out what to do. And this is where the Umbrella Man, poor guy, walks into the hospital at the worst time. And because his face was shown on the new screen, people target him, thinking that he is Michael, and they start chasing him through the hospital. And probably one of the worst ways possible. You can tell that he's in distress and he's panicking. Lori is very much caught up in the crowd along with Karen, and they're on the middle tail end of the crowd who's moving through the hospital. I think Karen and Lori both pick up on the fact that the Umbrella Man is not Michael, and they try and warn the masses. Lori says this funny line where she goes, "Stop chasing him. You guys are all fucking sheep," which I think is a very clever line to throw there. But because she ends up kneeing somebody in the stomach, she tears up her own stitches, and she's forced to go back into her own hospital bed. And this is where Karen kind of takes the reins and tries to stop the crowd herself. Obviously, she's just one person against many. So she then shifts her focus to helping the Umbrella Man. And she definitely tries her hardest to keep him alive. But unfortunately, I think the anxiety and the hysteria of the people chasing him throughout the hospital got to him, to where he ends up committing suicide by jumping off one of the window ledges. And mind you, he's at least 9 stories high.
That scene was crazy. Just seeing the visual of him, was insane, dude.
Seeing him fall the way that he did, and the way that he, for lack of better words, splattered on the pavement was insane. And the fact that they kept the twitches and the blinks and like that one last breath that you take right before you pass, they kept that all in there. And right before the Umbrella Man jumps out, this is where we see the crowd chanting on the outside of the hospital, "Evil dies tonight." And when Umbrella Man finally splatters onto the floor, this is where Brackett runs out, because Brackett is the hospital security, looks to Tommy and says, "This isn't Michael, like, it's not done, it's not finished." And Tommy, not wanting to have a guilty conscience, says, "Well, how do we know? We've never seen his face." Brackett again says, "No, this isn't him." And
which he's dumb as shit for telling that to a cop who's probably studied Michael, because Michael killed his fucking daughter.
Yeah, in the first film, in 78. So Tommy pulled a little dumb one, but he still tries to make up for it by going about his own way and trying to see if he can get even with Michael.
Brackett also, I think, said, too, that now we're turning into monsters.
Yeah,
again, like, which plays into the whole narrative of this film.
Yeah,
so.
That he is being successful in turning everybody within Haddonfield into monsters. So Tommy kind of takes that to heart, but still is on the lookout to hunt down Michael. We
also skipped over Hawkins being roomed with Laurie, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
They supposedly had some sort of like flirtatious relationship.
And like fling-ish.
Yeah, to the point to where they were almost together, but she had her eyes on Ben Tramer. But what confuses me about that scene is Laurie doesn't mention her crush on Ben Tramer until they're seniors, when she's 17.
Yeah.
Because remember, it specifically made that Annie didn't know she liked him until that scene, when she told her.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't like this dude until she was 17.
Either that or she kept quiet about it.
Oh, that's not the point. She doesn't make a move on him until she's 17.
Yeah.
So she's 17 when she's with Ben Tramer at this dance. But yet she kissed Hawkins that night. But Hawkins in 78 was one of the first responders to the Michael scene.
It's a plot hole, for sure. It's a plot hole for fucking sure.
It's not really a plot hole because the dance didn't happen that night. It's more so, was this dude like 23 or 24 messing around with a 17-year-old?
This is also in the 70s. It was worse in the 90s.
Just goes back to what I say. I'm not saying I condone it, but it happened a lot back then. Happened a lot back then.
Not the best.
Not the best time. But yeah, 23, 24 messing around with a 17-year-old. So anyways.
I digress.
They had like a little thing, and then he also explains to her how he could have killed Michael that night. When Loomis was going to put a bullet in Michael's head, he was the one who stopped it because all he could think was that somebody's baby boy was under that mask.
Yeah.
But now that's not the case. Now he knows it's just pure evil.
Mm-hmm.
So Hawkins believes now that it's not flesh and blood. It's not a man. It's not evil. Someone's son. It's evil.
It is just evil. And I'm saying it with a capital I.
Yeah. And Laurie agrees.
Laurie does agree. And I think like once Umbrella Man has like committed suicide and everything starts to die off, Tommy is still very much hell-bent on trying to find Michael.
Yeah, we can kind of like get through this. A bunch of other kills happen. Little John, Big John. Once we get there, Michael's back at his house, and that's where we get Lonnie, Cameron, and them pulling up because Lonnie made note that Michael has been going right back to his house.
He's been making a beeline through the town to his home. Lonnie takes Cameron and Allison with him, but right before he steps out of the truck, he says, "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm taking kids with me. I just need to finish this off myself." Gets Cameron and Allison to stay back. But shortly after walking into the home, Lonnie fires a shot, which causes the two to run out of the truck and into Myers' home. Allison is kind of looking around in her own way, trying to find Michael, and so is Cameron. But it seems that Cameron comes across Michael first because he finds blood dripping from the ceiling, looks up to see his father's body stuffed up in like the little compartment where it leads to the attic. When he looks back down, Michael breaks through a closet or a linen closet door and
he beats the shit out of Cameron, dude.
He takes a long time.
I can't even say he kills him right off the bat. No, he beats it's a good 5-minute scene of him getting beat up, dude.
I think so. I think right before he kills Cameron, he ends up breaking his neck in a way to where he's paralyzed and can't move. And because Allison is reacting the way that she is, Michael looks to her, kills Cameron, and then starts walking down towards her to kill her off for the final time.
Yeah.
Right before Michael can make that final strike, Karen has made her way to Myers' home in some way or form, pulls off the mask, distracts Michael, and gets him to follow her to a mob that Tommy is
It was
leading.
like a whole trap. She took the mask and he followed her. And once she drops the mask and he looks down to pick it up, they shine all the lights on him. And this scene, aura, bruh. Like, just the music that's playing on this scene, Marvelous. It's insane, dude.
It
is. I can't. I want to watch it right after this. We do this podcast, probably.
Yeah, I started playing the films just for like a smidgen and hearing the theme song. Excuse me, not me ready to watch the films again.
This scene
I'm sure you can tell we're big fans.
Yeah, this scene's incredible. And we get to see the mob take on Michael.
Yes.
And they do decent at first.
Yeah, Karen takes that final shot by hitting him, I think, in the base of his neck, right behind the shoulder blade. The only thing is, though, whenever she steps away and Tommy tells her, hey, it's okay, you can break off, Michael gets up within a split second and starts tearing through
It's terrifying
everybody.
the way he gets up, dude. Like, and while this is happening, you're getting a play-by-play with Lori talking to Hawkins, and she delivers that line that you hear in the trailer about how every single time Michael kills, he transcends.
He seems to like become more powerful, and not only that, Michael is not flesh and blood. He is something else entirely, and that she made the mistake of thinking that he's flesh and blood, which is the same mistake that Tommy's mob is making right now.
They get decimated. Even Brackett's old ass gets fucking sliced up.
Demolished, dude. Like at one point, one of the bystanders, because Michael slashes his knife so quick, cuts through his wrist to the point to where it's only the skin on the other side holding it down. Not the bone, not the ligaments, not the muscle. It's the fucking skin. Like, it's a lot of blood, at least for the Halloween franchise, and I loved it.
Yeah, and overall,
he does save Tommy for last, though.
He does save Tommy for last, and we get the iconic shot, or I should stop saying iconic, because I don't think people refer to this scene as iconic, but we get this awesome shot of Tommy staring into Michael's eyes and vice versa. It's almost like they shot like a rotation scene where like they're just...
You have the camera almost spinning around them.
While they're looking at each other, and I think for the first time ever, since he was a kid, Tommy realized that he was staring at the
boogeyman.
The boogeyman.
And not Michael Myers.
And he again beats the fuck out of Tommy. Not only does he stab him a couple of times,
he uses Huckleberry,
hits him twice, and the second one breaks over his head, and then with the bat that's shaped into a spear now, throws it into Tommy and stabs him with it.
Yeah, so he beats Tommy twice. One time was a good hit, second one causes the bat to break, and then third and final time, like MJ said, ends up skewering Tommy with that same Huckleberry bat.
And I think that's just what people don't understand about that scene is that Tommy is a central character.
He is.
And Tommy's whole plot, the whole plot for this film was Tommy to take out Michael.
Yeah.
And to prove that Michael is flesh and blood. And that's not the case.
No.
That is not the case. We find out that Michael is more than that.
He is.
And you and I found this out recently on our rewatch, and it's so sad it took me so long. I hated this scene a lot because it just seemed so stupid that Michael teleported, that he would have made it from, point A and got to point B within a split second. Mm-hmm. But that's actually not the case. And a lot of my friends even thought the same thing too, but when you're watching Allison and Karen on the doorstep of the Myers house and all the cops are there, they look really fucking sad. Mm-hmm. Now, Allison, that's kind of understandable because Cameron just passed.
Yeah. But
Karen looks like there's just like a dread on her face.
She looks very defeated.
And you're wondering why that's the case when they set that trap up. But then you realize that, they already know what happened to the mob. Karen already knows that they're all dead. The cops probably went there first and then came to her.
And informed them. About the group being killed.
And that's when Karen looks up at the window because, again, Michael's still alive. So she's thinking about Michael. What did he see out there?
Yeah. And she's a therapist herself. So she is probably trying to put herself into Michael's shoes.
She gets up there. And what do you know? Michael was already in the room. Because if y'all don't remember, Little John, we didn't really talk about this, but we'll probably cover it in the full review. Little John left the back door open.
He did.
So Michael had already beat them to the house and he was upstairs and catches Karen basically the same way he caught that guard too, right? The cop
Similar
staring
to
out the window. Yeah,
and so he kills Karen a lot like he killed Judith, but he kills Karen because she is looking out of the window. And while this is happening, Laurie seems to almost wake up and seems to have almost like a psychological connection with what's going on in the fact that
it's like something like surged through her. It seems like
she starts calling Karen, and
this is only an extended version, by the way. It's not in theatrical.
Yes, she starts calling Karen, and the person who picks up is Michael, and all she can hear is Michael's breathing, and that's the end of kills. Now,
very same to 78 when she called and it was Michael breathing. So,
yeah, I am going to speed run through Halloween Ends because I know a lot of people don't like it. I am just going to cover like the basis of the story.
It's also 1 a.m. while we're recording too, and we both have to work in the morning. So
aside from that, I'm just gonna speed run through Ends. Like MJ and I have been saying throughout this podcast and all the previous podcasts for the Halloween films and franchise in general, we can't always go in depth with these movies, but we do want to just cover the timeline so you guys know and fully understand. And even like have a better insight on what the original intent of these timelines and like stories were. But when it comes to Ends, I feel like it is very much a love story to all the Halloween movies that have come out. The movie does not start off with a classic Halloween riff. It starts off with a radio being tuned. You get introduced to a character by the name of Corey, who is a very meek babysitter. The kid that he's babysitting is a fucking prick and locks him away in a little closet. I think Corey is claustrophobic at this point in time.
I think so, yeah.
So he starts having a panic attack and ends up accidentally pushing this kid over the 3rd story of the stairway, which causes the kid, Jeremy, to literally dive down head first onto the floor right when his parents are walking in. And they watch their child bleed out right in front of them after having a good night out on Halloween night. Jeremy's mom is screaming, "What have you done?" And then that's where the Halloween Ends logo comes up, and it's blue, very similar to Season of the Witch.
A lot of, again, like what you said, homages to older Halloween films.
Yeah. At this point in time, we hear Laurie almost narrating throughout this part of the film, saying how ever since Michael has disappeared 4 years ago, the whole town has gone into paranoia, hysteria, and almost turning on each other. A lot of people are taking on and shouldering on burdens and the heavy weight of just Michael himself, even though they were never really in any full contact with him.
People are committing suicide,
shootings, murder. Cops are willing to blame gunshot wounds and kills on Michael, and Michael doesn't use guns to begin with. Hawkins seems to have also climbed up the ranks at this point.
David Gordon Green said that this film would feature a time jump, which it did, but it would also center around COVID. I didn't really see where COVID came into play, but do you think that's what he meant during those 4 years? That because the film 2018 happened in 2018, so 4 years puts it at 2022. Yeah. So do you think one of the reasons why the town couldn't recover after Michael was because COVID happened too? It just had to go into isolation. It got hit with more hysteria, paranoia. More things. Because that happened in real life, bro. People committed suicide during the COVID shit. They did. That was a real thing.
They did. You were forced to sit down and be in your own thoughts. And while a lot of people find that as a good thing, some people don't. So I can see where COVID really came into play with that, and the paranoia. The paranoia could have built even more.
Yeah, it's not mentioned specifically, which is why Marvalous and I thought that was weird to say this movie centers around COVID. But I guess that's the idea maybe in that time skip.
It's not in your face. It's very implicit, if you will.
We get some stuff with Laurie and Allison. Laurie's trying to be the grandmother now, if you will.
She also bought a home in Haddonfield, not on the outskirts.
She's not in her prison, you know. And she's doing motherly things, and they seem to be getting along kinda, even though you can tell there's some stuff going on under the skin of Allison when it comes to Laurie, but it's not being brought out. And,
not yet. Allison seems very much quiet and shut down and very to herself at this point in time, which is, excuse me, a little different from the Allison that we do know.
Not how she talked to Karen at all. You know, so.
But at the same time, she has lost her parents. She is still very much grieving, and you can tell that she still is grieving. Allison, I believe, is trying to be a physician's assistant, a PA. So she's working at the Memorial Hospital, and then Lori is working on a autobiography, if you will. So that's where we get the narration of Lori throughout the film, because as she's typing, we have her narrating what's going on in the movie throughout the entire Ends movie.
I don't remember which spot this happens particularly at, but I do know earlier in the film she gets confronted by one of the victims from Kills who survived. It was the lady who I guess ran the cemetery and also had her husband get killed in Kills.
Yeah.
And
Lori
is
was
with
in the grocery store.
Yeah, she's with her sister, and her sister tells her that you provoked and teased Michael, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
And that's not the only time we hear it. It seems to come up later in that exact phrasing, you provoked and teased Michael.
Yeah.
So that seems to be kind of like the town's consensus on Lori and Michael, which
is really interesting.
Yeah, that really wasn't there before. And Marvelous and I came up with a little theory that might be backed up, is the idea that evil is very prevalent in this film, very much like it was in Kills.
Yeah.
And we feel like when Michael disappeared, they wanted to create a new monster, someone else to blame. So they kind of went after Lori for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then once the Corey thing happened, they were able to jump on Corey. So Lori probably didn't get as much of the heat
hate and the heat
that Corey got, you
yeah.
know. So
because he kind of fit the criteria, right? He wasn't necessarily a stalker of babysitters, but he was a babysitter who killed, be it accident or otherwise.
Yeah, a babysitter killer, essentially.
Yeah.
So
and at this point, after that interaction, I think Lori kind of breaks off, does her own thing, and then it cuts back to Corey. Corey is at a gas station, ironically enough, picking up chocolate milk. And when
that sounds good right now.
When he's trying to leave, these group of high schoolers are trying to pressure him to get alcohol because they won a game or about to win a game or going to play a good game, something along like the football lines. And Corey says no. These people start bullying him around and pushing him around. Poor guy ends up dropping his chocolate milk that he just bought and cut up his hands. Lori,
he squeezed it in his hand.
Oh, he squeezed it in his hands, which is fucking insane because you breaking a solid glass bottle with your bare hands and nothing else to help you break it shows just how much force and like power you have. But these kids didn't let up. They were very much riding their high horse and like cornering him. And
he gets picked on by both teenagers and older people, which is kind of crazy.
It's insane. He tolerates a lot, and you can see it throughout the film. And he wants to speak up, but he's rather meek about it. He doesn't really say much. I think the only person who really stands up for him is Lori, but Lori also gets another side comment from the same teenager saying, look, it's the psycho and the freak show getting together. Like, it's a match made in heaven. Not necessarily like they're going to be getting together, but that they were meant for each other in the sense of like being in each other's lives.
Again, Lori's not looked at in the best light now. Like,
no.
It seems like these past 4 years, her rep is kind of taking a hit. So
it has come down severely. So at this point, what is it? Lori takes
him to Allison since she works there. So
to the hospital, and Allison works on Corey. The two of them seem to bond. Allison invites him to a Halloween party. And once Allison is off from work, she gets back home, and Lindsay's actually there. She's doing a tarot card reading for Allison. And this is where Lindsay kind of tells Allison that, hey, you know, it seems like your grandmother set this whole thing up. Your grandmother is very much into matchmaking. And even Lori admits the fact that she thought that Corey was nice, cute, and somebody that Allison could easily get along with. So she kind of hops on whatever train she was on earlier while at work, because she was heavily hitting on Corey while she was trying to stitch him up. And
I do want to say before I forget this, because I know we are kind of speedrunning this, is Corey's dialogue is actually very realistic throughout this movie.
Yes.
And that's something that I think hinders a lot of these films. Even in 2018, the dialogue's a little, not even campy, just it feels like this is not something a teenager would say.
Yeah.
And then even in Kills, like Allison saying, oh, for many decades, he's haunted our family, but no longer, evil dies tonight. That just does not sound like something a teenager would say. Yeah. Whereas in this film, Corey
is a young adult.
And the way he speaks, like there's even moments where he's not even speaking at all. And that's so real, dude. Like when you're getting berated, like you almost like shut down sometimes if you're not in the best mental state to clap back. Like that's such a real mood, dude. Like to see him kind of just like take it all in, and it's like it's sad to see that, but that's so realistic. Like he didn't come back with some paragraph on evil and the righteous of what happened. You know, like it's just he's taking it in. And it's so sad, but
definitely
his dialogue is very realistic, and I think that's what helps this movie, especially on selling the relationship of him and Allison.
It does, yeah, because once the two of them get to the party, they seem to be having a good time. Jeremy's mother, ironically enough, is at the same party, and I think she's under the influence, but she like kind of corners Corey. Corey breaks off, and Allison catches Corey breaking off, and this is where he comes into contact with Michael. I think he's riding his bike and ends up falling off a hill.
The kids push him down because he called the dude, the main guy who drives the car, that like his dad hates him or something.
Yeah.
So he gets mad, pushes him over, and then Corey, gets pulled into where the sewer system is, where Michael's been living.
Yeah.
And that's where we get the very controversial Corey looking into Michael's eyes, and he almost sees like everything that Corey has dealt with. Yeah. There's even some little scenes in there that we didn't see play out, like him in the courtroom and stuff like that. So
yeah, like
Michael is seeing everything that Corey went through, and you and I have the interpretation of why we don't dislike this scene like a lot of other people, is that we have to assume this is what the other people saw, and if they didn't see this, then that means they saw Michael, so that could be why Lindsay is so traumatized. That could be why Tommy got struck in fear. That could be why
you see your life literally flash before your eyes.
So it could be a situation where everyone saw Michael's life flash before their eyes, which is why Laurie is the only person who believes he's more than, because she probably saw what Loomis saw, just a kid staring out the window, like the devil's eyes.
Yeah.
Whereas Michael saw Corey's life, and that was the distinctive difference between them and why he let him live.
Yeah, because Corey ends up walking away, goes back to connects with Allison again, and then that's where Corey starts almost taking a power trip after that instance.
Becoming Michael, and that's really the words of Laurie too. His eyes are like Michael's now.
Yeah, he's very much confident in himself. He's speaking up and speaking out. He even brings up the idea to Allison for the two of them to leave town. Allison is still a little reluctant about the idea because she still cares for Laurie and is under the impression that she needs to stay in town for Laurie. But what Corey says really gets under her skin. She starts like lashing out as well to her coworkers, her mentor, because she's not necessarily being treated the best. Corey also seems to be lashing out at the people who aren't treating him the best either. Yeah. And then at some point, he ends up meeting back with Michael, looking to him and saying, like, you have to show me how you do it. And this happens with Allison's ex, who is a cop, who is also very much older than her, or at least appears to be so.
Fucking Haddonfield, bro.
So Michael kills the cop, and there's this, what you call it, the orgasmic scene, but it doesn't really last so once Michael gets that good kill, he almost gets like this power surge, and he like starts shaking.
I remember it lasting a lot longer, no pun intended on that, in the theaters, but it's not that long here.
No, it's maybe like, 5 seconds, 6 seconds at most.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
But Corey is holding down this officer while Michael is stabbing away at him, so he gets to like really feel and see how it's like for the life to drain out of somebody. And after seeing that, Corey takes notes and goes on a killing spree himself.
They start killing everybody, like anyone that Alice is associated with, like the doctor, her coworker.
And same with Corey.
Once Corey gets the mask from Michael, which
he uses the scarecrow mask that he had in the original Halloween party that he was invited to in the beginning, which is very, very similar to both the clown mask, like color-wise, that Michael and Jamie used, but has the same material and cut out like the Rob Zombie clown mask.
Very interesting. Again, taking everything from all the past films.
Yes.
And we finally get to a scene to where Corey's had enough. He had a conversation with Laurie, and that's where Laurie breaks down the difference of evil. One is an external force that comes after you, and the other one is infectious. It lives inside you and it grows. Yeah. That one being the most dangerous, and that's what we're perceived to believe that Corey has.
Yeah,
that's
and
his
Michael
evil.
Is the force, if you will.
Yes. But that pisses Corey off. He calls Allison, we're leaving tonight. Your grandmother wants to kill me. Or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And then that's when he heads over to Michael. He gets the mask. He out-wrestles him. Not the biggest fan of that scene, but it is what it is. Michael's weak at this point.
Yeah, I think he only has 1 or 2 kills under his belt after about 4 years.
Yeah.
So, but the cool thing is, though, even though Corey bested him, Michael immediately sets up in a very like classic Michael-like way and makes his way to follow Corey.
Corey goes on his own killing spree. He kills a whole bunch of people, including his bullies.
The bullies. and then he makes his way over to Lori's place, and Lori pretends to commit suicide after having a fight with Allison. Corey falls for it, and Lori bests him, if you will. They have a square off. And
it was a lot shorter than I remembered. She kind of fucks him up.
She does very quickly. And he's also very inexperienced, mind you. I think he only has 6 or 7 kills under his belt, which is a lot. But compared to Michael, it's a whole lot less. I think Corey gets injured, but when Allison is pulling up to the house again, because mind you, at this point, she is at the diner, at the meeting place that her and Corey has set earlier on that day, and at least an hour has passed from the time that they were supposed to meet. So she goes to Corey's old house, sees his mother all mauled up and bloody, goes to her grandmother's house, and this is where Corey and Lori have this interesting conversation where Corey says, if I can't have Allison, then no one will, grabs the knife that he was using and stabs himself in the neck to die.
And right as Lori pulls the knife out to kind of save him a little bit there,
Allison ends up walking in and explodes on her even more. This is where Lori actually has a full-on breakdown, curls up into a ball, but we come to find out it's not just Lori and Corey's body. Michael is also in the house, and this is where the final fight starts to happen. And
Michael is actually the one who kills Corey. I did not remember that, but he's the one who kills him, gets the mask back.
Because I think Corey sits up very much like the classic Michael way, where he
tries to, but Michael stops him halfway, which is kind of very funny. I'm not going to hold you.
I like it. And you and I made this comment this time when we were watching Ends, where it seems like Michael is taking back whatever force Corey was leaking out of him.
Him killing Corey almost powered him up.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that you and I glossed over was the fact that the radio tower was a big thing within this film, very similar to Season of the Witch,
where they used the radio tower and signals and everything.
But the radio tower doesn't have the same effect of Season of the Witch as it does in this film. But I did want to bring that up because again, it pays a lot of homages to the previous Halloween films that have come out. But going back to Michael and the Lori square off, once Michael gets his mask on, he's back in the zone. He's hunting for Lori. And even though 4 years have passed, Lori is very much in the survival instinct mode. She is tucking away left and right in her own home, trying to make sure that she doesn't get caught. Finally corners Michael into her kitchen. And I think she impales him by the hand with a knife, and then gets a knife down on the other hand, and then even knocks down the fridge over him. Says, you're not the boogeyman, you're flesh and blood, going against everything she said, and kills. And she says that she can finally lay him to rest and kill him. Michael obviously proves her wrong by, and oh god, this part kind of irks me. One of his hands is up, the palm of his hand is facing up, and he ends up pulling it down, so his hand is split into two, almost Spock-like, and he grips Lori by the throat, trying to choke her out. This is around the time where Allison gets the phone call from Hawkins saying, hey, we got a tip from your grandmother's home saying that she's going to commit suicide, so she turns around, runs back into the home, and breaks the very arm that Michael was using to kill her.
You glossed over that she slit his throat.
She did slice his throat.
And that was supposed to... That pretty much kills anybody instantly, especially...
And it was a slice straight across his neck. Not a small one. Big ass one.
And he was able to, like you said, pull his hand out while still bleeding out from his neck, grab her with his hand all mangled up.
And still put enough force to where she could barely breathe.
She was about to die.
Yeah.
And unless Allison came in.
Allison came in, broke his arm, and that's where Lori is able to re-skewer Michael back onto her kitchen island, that is also a cutting board. And this is where Lori gets the knife again and starts slitting Michael's wrist as well, to where he's fully bled out. And then stabs him in the armpit, very similar to how he did Big John.
Cops pull up, Hawkins pulls up, and they straight up ask, is he dead? Allison says he's not dead enough.
Not dead enough, yeah.
They tie him to a cop car, and they even all say, we're not supposed to be doing this, but this is how they're going to do it tonight.
They tie him to Allison's car.
And they're going to do it like this tonight, and they're going to parade him around. They're going to show people of Haddonfield what's happened to Michael.
And the sheriff was on board with all this, by the way.
I think Hawkins straight up says it's time for Haddonfield to start healing.
Yeah.
And everyone that we've seen from the previous films, even the ones who were attacked and injured, they're all pulling up to the junkyard. And
And it's the same junkyard that Corey used to work out, by the way.
They drop Michael into the
car shredder.
And we literally see his body get crushed and shredded.
Yes. You see his skull split in two, and then you see everything else get crushed up. So that's where you start to see the evil and like that dark cloud almost break away from Haddonfield. Everybody, once the body is gone, everybody goes away because whenever Lori and Allison were taking the body over to the junkyard, it was a line of cars and a line of people following to that point. So once they saw that the body was gone, everybody dispersed, and the next scene is Lori at her doorstep, sitting down, looking over the street that she's in. Hawkins shows up, and Lori is ready to start her next chapter in her life, which is actually enjoying life.
Allison has moved out, and I think she's narrating it, but it doesn't show her typing it, where she says evil doesn't die, it doesn't go away, it just changes shape.
Yep.
And that's how Halloween ends. I think I rate 2018 like a 9.5 out of 10. Kills is probably like a 7.5 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Ends is like a 6.5 out of 10. Maybe it might go up to a 7 if I rewatch it.
I would say 5.5, 6 at most on a good day.
Yeah.
I agree with Kills and I agree with 2018 for sure. But like you said, 2018 does a lot of calls from 78, so it's very difficult for you to not give it such a high rating.
Plus, I think what fucks ends up a lot is the marketing. They market it as a whole showdown film of Michael and Lori. But Michael doesn't even show up until like 45 minutes into the movie. So I can see why people were upset and people walked out. I heard people walked out of the movie.
People did walk out. So I did hear a lot of people be upset whenever we were watching it. But you and I promised ourselves that we would watch it through no matter how angry we were at the film. First time we watched it, I wasn't too upset. I had a lot of questions, but I wasn't too upset. Second time, it made more sense. Third time, it made even more sense. And now I think it's like the fourth time or the fifth time. I have learned to like it more. I also think I learned to like it more because you and I sat back and watched all the Halloween movies up until this point, so I could pick up on all the homages in like a very
especially if you watch 2018 Kills and Ends, it hits a lot better.
Yes.
Because these films aren't really about Michael. Excuse me. It's about the concept of evil.
Yeah.
And that plays a factor all the way into the very last line of Ends, where evil doesn't die, it doesn't go away, it just changes shape.
It's very much like the concept of energy, right? You can't break energy or like take away mass. It just disperses and changes into a different shape, very much like evil. So if evil in the Haddonfield universe is a form of energy, you can't destroy said energy. It can only be reattributed into different things, and like Lori said, changes shape. So all in all, I think this is my favorite timeline. Close second would be John Carpenter's. And then, funny enough, I would rank the Rob Zombie films over the Thorn trilogy. For me.
Damn, that's tough, dude. But we gotta get out of here. So I'm just gonna say I agree with both of your top, but I would switch the bottom. So Rob Zombie would go last and Thorn will go up above that. Just because I rank 4 so high, but I know you don't rank 4 as high as I do. So that's probably why. I like 4,
but not as high as you, for sure.
Yeah.
I would say it's like top 5 Halloween films, but not like top 3.
So make sure you go follow us on Instagram because we're going to be doing a poll soon.
Yes.
If you want to see us cover Halloween, Sam Hain, and just the overall legends of Halloween, or if you want to see us cover Terrifier 3 as the last Tuesday of October. Now, we aren't going to cover all of the Terrifier films, it's going to be 3.
Yes.
And so leave us a yes or no on the poll. Strictly on Instagram, you cannot find this poll here. Go follow us at /and-sync.
Yes.
And it'll be in the description of wherever you're watching or listening this to. Mm-hmm. But this has been the conclusion of our Halloween timeline. We're finally done, man.
Yeah,
and we hope you enjoyed these as much as we enjoyed doing them for you.
Not only that, but hopefully you understand and know where to place all these and how you can get different stories of Michael, all stemming from that one movie, 1978.
Exactly. So happy Halloween, and thank you guys for tuning in as always.
Bye.